My name is Sarah. I'm 32, single, and apparently, the backbone of a family that never asked if I had a spine to begin with. People say I'm responsible, stable, the good daughter. What they don't know is that being the good one often feels like being a doormat with a permanent smile stitched onto your face. I live in a one-bedroom apartment downtown. It's not much, but it's mine. At least it used to feel like mine before I started funneling half my paycheck back into the suburbs where my parents, Robert and Linda, live. They retired 5 years ago. Dad was a high school teacher, Mom a nurse. Both fiercely proud and endlessly good at reminding me how hard life is without a working income. Every Sunday I make the drive out to their house with groceries in my trunk and wine under my arm. A little peace offering. A little compensation for all the ways I've apparently fallen short of being their perfect child. Then there's Diana, my older sister. Married to Tom for over a decade and pumping out children like it's a group project I forgot to join. Ethan is 11, Mason is 9, and Logan, well, he just turned 7 and already throws tantrums like a seasoned politician. Diana and her family live just 15 minutes from Mom and Dad, but you'd think they were trekking across continents every time they come over. At these Sunday dinners, the house is chaos. Boys screaming over video games, Tom watching sports on his phone with the volume up, Diana loudly listing everything the kids need this month, from new soccer cleats to some science camp that apparently costs more than my rent. Through all the noise, I set the table, refill water glasses, and listen. Always listening. Last week, my mom greeted me the same way she always does, with a tired smile and a sigh heavy enough to break a window. "There's barely anything left in the fridge, Sarah," she said, while pulling a half-defrosted pot roast from the oven. "We're really scraping by this month." Dad was already at the table sipping a beer, squinting at some article on his tablet like it might jump off the screen and punch him. "Food prices are insane these days," he mumbled. "Can't believe eggs are $5 a carton now." I nodded sympathetically and placed the wine on the counter. "I brought a few things, some frozen meals, eggs, milk, orange juice, your kind of cereal." "Sweetheart, you really shouldn't spend so much on us," Mom said, even as she took the bags from my hands and started sorting through them. "That's the game. The subtle performance. The little dance we do. They act like they don't expect it. Like they're burdened by my help. And yet, if I showed up empty-handed, the guilt would be so thick you could butter it on toast." Diana joined us just before dessert, waving a sheet of paper like a winning lottery ticket. "I finally got organized," she beamed. "This is everything the boys need for next month. School stuff, sports equipment, shoes, you name it." She handed me the list with the nonchalance of someone tossing junk mail. I glanced at the total, $1,500. "I'll take care of it," I said. The words came out automatically like a prayer I didn't believe in anymore. Diana clapped her hands and called me a lifesaver. My parents exchanged proud glances as if they'd raised a saint. No one asked if I could afford it. No one asked how I was doing. When I pulled out my new phone to take a picture of the list, because yes, I've learned to document the loans that never come back, my mother noticed immediately. "Is that the new iPhone? The one that costs over $1,000? She asked, her tone sharper than usual. I slipped the phone back into my pocket. "I saved up for it." Mom just shook her head. "Well, as long as you're not wasting money." That's when I felt it. That tiny crack beneath my ribs. The beginning of something shifting inside me. I'd felt it before, when they forgot my birthday 3 years in a row, or when Diana made fun of me for not having kids yet. But this time it stuck. Something was breaking. Quietly. Fully. And I didn't know it yet, but that crack? It would become a fault line. It started with a push notification. "Payment overdue. Your credit card minimum is 3 days late." At first I thought it was a glitch. I'd never missed a payment in my life. I was the kind of person who scheduled reminders to schedule reminders. But when I opened my banking app, the number staring back at me didn't lie. Not only was I late, I was overdrawn. That made no sense. I hadn't bought anything extravagant. My rent was paid. My utilities auto-deducted. The only splurge I'd made in months was that new phone, and even then I'd used a separate savings account I'd built for 6 months. I tapped through the transaction history and froze. There was a cash advance withdrawal, $3,000. Made from a card I didn't even use anymore. Then I remembered, the secondary card. The one I'd added for Mom 3 years ago, when Dad had his first health scare and they couldn't afford the hospital copay. Back then it made sense. They needed help. I had a stable job. It was supposed to be for emergencies only. I called her immediately. She answered on the third ring, her voice bright like she'd just stepped out of a warm shower. Sarah, honey, is everything okay? I didn't even bother with pleasantries. Mom, did you use the credit card last week? Silence. Then a soft intake of breath. Oh, that. Yes, but it was urgent. Your father's back pain flared up again. He couldn't move, Sarah. We had to get a cortisone shot and the doctor doesn't take insurance. I was going to tell you. I sat down on the edge of my bed, squeezing the phone until my fingers tingled. $3,000? There were other costs. The pharmacy, the consultation, a few follow-up sessions. You know how these things go. Her voice cracked and for a moment the guilt washed over me like a tide. I imagined Dad groaning in pain, Mom panicking, trying to scrape together money in the middle of the night. I closed my eyes and took a breath. Hey, it's fine. Just, next time tell me first. I didn't want to worry you, she said quickly. You already do so much. We're lucky to have you. That was the problem, wasn't it? I kept doing so much. And they kept taking, wrapped in ribbons of gratitude that somehow made it worse. After I hung up, I transferred another $1,000 to pay off the card and clear the interest. Then I sat on the couch and stared at the blank television screen. I should have felt relief. I should have felt useful. But what I felt was wrong. Like something was rotting under the surface and I just swallowed it whole. That night I couldn't sleep. My brain kept replaying the phone call in pieces. The casual tone. The delay in her answer. The way her voice cracked like she'd practiced it. Something about it didn't sit right. I checked the card again the next morning. This time I dug deeper, into the merchant codes, the location of the withdrawal. It wasn't from a medical office. It was a general ATM in the shopping district downtown. The same street as La Lumiere, that boutique perfumery my mom always said was for people who hate their wallets. And 2 doors down was Le Bijou. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself it was a coincidence. That she'd gotten the money there and gone straight to the doctor. That the timing meant nothing. But I didn't sleep the next night either. Or the one after that. I started noticing things. A new silk scarf she wore on Sunday. A bottle of imported wine in their recycling bin. Subtle hints. Sharp edges. By the end of the week, I'd written off the whole incident as paranoia. I told myself I was being dramatic. That maybe they just wanted one nice dinner. That maybe I was the selfish one. I didn't know it yet, but this was just the first crack in the foundation. And very soon it would split wide open. It was a Tuesday evening when it happened. The city was already cloaked in winter dusk, lights flickering to life across downtown like fireflies caught in glass. I was leaving a late client meeting, mentally drained and physically starving. My car was parked 3 blocks away, so I cut across side streets, the familiar ache of heels forgotten in the cold. That's when I saw it. Or rather saw them. Le Bijou. Even from across the street, the golden glow of its chandeliers spilled onto the sidewalk, casting a dreamlike shimmer on everything it touched. The restaurant was known for exclusivity, decadence, and wine pairings that required a sommelier degree to pronounce. I'd passed by it 100 times, always thinking maybe one day, a special occasion, a big promotion, something worth celebrating. And then I saw them. Through the tall windows, seated at a corner booth dressed in velvet, were my parents. My mother, in a cream silk blouse and the new scarf I had noticed just days earlier. My father, laughing, actually laughing, as he raised a glass of red wine I could only assume cost more than my phone bill. Their table was set with silver chargers, dishes I recognized from Le Bijou's seasonal menu. A glistening duck confit. A tower of scallops balanced on saffron foam. The kind of meal that needed a reservation booked 3 weeks in advance and a credit card with a platinum gleam. I stood frozen across the street, the city suddenly mute. Horns honked. Tires splashed through slush. But I heard nothing except the rush of blood in my ears. They were supposed to be struggling. They were supposed to be scraping together grocery money, skipping medication doses, living humbly in the name of retirement and sacrifice. Just 2 days ago, Mom had cried on the phone about the heating bill. I had to wear 2 sweaters to bed, Sarah. It's a good thing your father has you. I don't know what we'd do without you. Apparently, they dine at Le Bijou. I took a step forward, my first instinct to storm in. Not with rage but confusion. I needed answers. I needed her to look me in the eye and explain why I had been skipping lunches to pay for their gas bills while they toasted duck in a crystal cocoon of wealth and lies. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was heartbreak. Maybe I just knew that once I walked through those doors, nothing would ever be the same again. So I stayed there, on the sidewalk, watching my parents laugh like carefree newlyweds on a European vacation while my frozen breath hovered in front of me like a question I didn't know how to ask. Then my mother reached across the table and touched my father's hand. And he smiled, that soft boyish smile he used to give me when he tucked me in as a kid. And I broke. Not in the dramatic public breakdown way, but quietly, invisibly. Something inside me cracked, not just from the betrayal but from the realization that I had spent my entire adult life trying to earn love I thought was conditional. That if I just gave enough, paid enough, sacrificed enough, maybe, just maybe, I would be chosen. Valued. But watching them now, in that glowing restaurant, I realized they had always known how to care. They just never cared that way about me. I turned around and walked away. I didn't cry. Not then. The tears would come later. In waves, in gulps, in the privacy of my apartment where silence was deafening and the fridge was empty, not from poverty, but because I had forgotten how to shop for one. That night I didn't eat. I didn't sleep. I lay in bed replaying every Sunday dinner, every guilt-laced favor, every manipulated moment dressed in love's clothing. And in the stillness between those memories, a new thought crept in. If they could choose themselves, so could I. I tried to shake it off. I told myself it was just one dinner, one indulgence. Maybe they'd been gifted it somehow. Maybe it was a retirement perk I didn't know about. But deep down I knew better. The image of their smiles under golden light haunted me like a ghost that refused to leave my apartment. And as much as I wanted to forget, I couldn't. That Friday night I called Ethan. Ethan was my favorite. My soft spot. 11 years old and sharp as a whip. When Diana was too busy for school projects, I was the one who helped him build a working volcano out of clay and vinegar. When he had nightmares, he'd call me before he called his mom. He was the only reason I hadn't pulled away completely. Not yet. "Hey kiddo," I said when the screen lit up with his face. He was lounging on the living room couch, iPad in hand, crumbs on his shirt. "Hi Aunt Sarah," he said, barely looking up. "Are you coming on Sunday?" "I think so. I just wanted to say hi. And check in. How was your math test?" He shrugged. "Easy. I got a 92. Mom said it's 'cause of all the tutoring you gave me." I smiled. That tiny flicker of warmth I still clung to. "Well, I'm proud of you." Before I could finish, Diana's voice cut through from somewhere off screen. Loud. Clipped. "Ethan, don't talk too long. Remember, Aunt Sarah's too busy these days. She doesn't really help us anymore." The words hit like a slap. Ethan didn't flinch. He just repeated them without even realizing the damage they carried. "Yeah, Mommy says you don't want to help anymore, 'cause you're saving for something selfish. Like a vacation or a dog or something." I felt the breath leave my lungs. "Is that what she said?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light, but my throat had gone dry. He nodded, chewing something. "She says you don't understand how hard it is for us. That you're lucky, 'cause you're alone and don't have real responsibilities." Lucky. That word sat heavy in my chest, like an anchor dropped in shallow waters. I didn't correct him. I didn't defend myself. I just stared at the screen, at his innocent face echoing poison he didn't even know he was sipping. "I gotta go," he said. "Bye, Aunt Sarah." The call ended. The screen went black. I didn't move for a long time. Just sat there, gripping my phone until the corners dug into my skin. That child, my sweet Ethan, didn't even realize he'd just repeated the one message I'd fought my whole life not to believe. That I wasn't doing enough. That no matter how much I gave, it would never count unless I gave everything. I thought about all the nights I stayed up helping him study while Diana posted memes about being overworked. The holidays I worked overtime to afford their gifts while Tom looked for opportunities. The birthdays I planned, the doctor's visits I offered to pay for, the quiet way I slipped envelopes into Diana's purse when she claimed she'd forgotten her wallet. No, I was the villain. As I dared to hesitate, because I stopped saying yes before they even finished asking. Aunt Sarah, the selfish one. Aunt Sarah, the one who buys phones instead of school shoes. That night I cried for real. Not the silent, stoic tears of before. I sobbed into a towel on the bathroom floor, like a teenager who just realized the world isn't fair. I cried for the kid who never asked for much but gave too freely. For the adult who kept hoping someone would notice she was bleeding while handing out bandages. And when I finally stopped crying, I wasn't empty. I was clear. The following Sunday I showed up like I always did. Groceries in hand. Smile on autopilot. But inside I was a quiet storm gathering speed. Mom opened the door, apron on, hair curled, her usual matriarchal performance polished to perfection. "You're early," she said, not unkindly, just surprised. "You must have had a quiet weekend." I gave a small nod and walked inside. The house smelled like pot roast. Again. The same ritualized comfort food, like nothing ever changed here, as if it was 1998 forever and none of us had grown up or grown apart. Dad was in his chair sipping a beer. The boys were already sprawled across the living room, arguing over a controller. Diana stood at the kitchen island, thumbing through her phone like a bored executive. I placed the bags on the counter and began unloading. Eggs, juice, yogurt, fresh fruit. Things I couldn't afford to keep stocked in my own fridge lately. Dinner went as it always did. Loud, messy, emotionally hollow. Mom fussed over the roast. Dad made passive comments about the economy. Diana listed every item her kids needed for school next month. And then, like clockwork, she handed me a new sheet of paper. Neatly printed. Color-coded. Dollar signs screaming from every line. At the bottom, $1,875. "I added the upcoming field trips," she said casually. "You know how expensive buses are now." I didn't look at it. Instead, I looked at her. Really looked. At the effortless entitlement in her posture. The flick of her perfectly manicured nail as she slid the paper across the table. Like it was an invoice. Like I was the accountant. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out a manila folder. "I brought something too," I said. Mom perked up. "What's that?" I opened the folder slowly, deliberately, and laid out 2 glossy photos on the table. A shot of my parents through the window at Le Bijou, laughing over wine, clinking glasses. The second was a close-up of the receipt. I had gone back the next morning and sweet-talked a server into giving me a copy. 2 entrees. A bottle of Chateau Margaux. Dessert. Total, $462.57. For a moment no one said a word. Then Mom cleared her throat. "What is this supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, steady as I could manage, "that I'm done being lied to." Dad leaned forward, brow furrowing. "We never lied to you. Didn't you?" I said louder now. "You told me the fridge was empty. That you were skipping meals. That you needed me. And all the while, you're out drinking vintage Bordeaux while I was Venmoing you grocery money." Diana rolled her eyes. "Oh my God, are you serious right now? You're mad about one meal." I turned to her. It wasn't just one meal. It was the lie. It was making me feel guilty for buying a phone while you're feeding your kids organic dragon fruit I paid for. It's Ethan telling me I'm selfish because you taught him to see me that way. Her mouth dropped slightly. "What are you talking about? You told him I don't want to help anymore. That I'm saving for a vacation or a dog. Do you know how that felt? Coming from him." She stammered. "That's not what he must have misunderstood." "No, he repeated you word for word." Dad stood up now, voice raised. "Don't talk to your sister like that. He has a family to support. Real responsibilities." I stood too. "So do I. Me. I have to support me. But apparently that's not real because I don't have a husband or 3 kids draining me dry." "You've always been dramatic," Mom said sharply. "You don't understand what it's like to sacrifice for your children." I laughed, a short, bitter thing. "I've been sacrificing for your children. And hers. And you. I've been bleeding into this family like it's a duty. And all I ever get is more requests and less respect." Diana crossed her arms. "So what, you want applause now? A trophy for being single and resentful?" "No," I said. "I want peace." From my bag I pulled out a crisp envelope and placed it on the table. This was supposed to be a surprise. A gift. Inside is a cashier's check for $10,000. "I had it prepared for your 40th anniversary." Mom gasped. Dad looked stunned. "And I was going to book you a cruise. The Mediterranean one you always dreamed about. All-inclusive. A private suite. Champagne on arrival." They both stared at me, eyes wide, mouths slightly open. Except now I realize, You already treat yourselves better than I ever could. I ripped the envelope clean in half. Mom let out a noise like a choked sob. Sarah. I shook my head. Save it. Keep the roast. Keep the guilt. Keep your Sunday routines and your sad eyes and your golden lies. I'm done playing the role of your martyr. Tom, who had been silent the entire meal, finally muttered, "Well, someone's having a meltdown." I looked at him like he was a stain on the tablecloth. You've been living off my generosity for years, Tom. Maybe sit this one out.